I don't think Luke liked his draft very much.
Yeah, okay, first of all, what did you like about your draft, man? You gotta tell me what's going on.
I showed up late to it and auto-drafted for the first 3 rounds.
Oh, no.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, football fans, to another episode of Locked On NFL. It is Tuesday here, which means you've got myself, Ross Jackson, host of Locked On Saints, joined as always by my good friend Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings, who is new to YouTube. You can go and find him on YouTube. And of course, we're on YouTube as well as wherever you get your podcasts, free and on all platforms every Monday through Friday. Look at that thumbs up. You can follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola, Luke on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL. And for today's episode, we're going to start off with a visit with our friend Christopher Carter. You hear him here on Fridays on Locked On NFL, but also over at the Locked On Steelers podcast. He's going to talk about the TJ Watt hold in and what it means for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Then we're going to talk about Houston Texans finding their new starting quarterback. And finally, we're going to be joined by Marcus Mosher of Locked On Dynasty Football to help out Luke with the football team, his fantasy football team, which he absolutely hates. We've got all of that and much more.
Good luck, Marcus.
He'll do what he can. We got all that coming up for you on today's episode of Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Chris, thanks so much for taking the time to join us. We have some big news to talk through with your guy, TJ Watt, holding in. What can you tell us about this situation?
Yeah, I'm glad you used the phrase correctly because he's not holding out. It's the weirdest situation. I mean, he's there every day. He's even palling around with the players. You know, you can see pictures from practice where he's posing with Melvin Ingram and, you know, doing things. And he's been wearing these
who knows a thing or two about this?
Who knows? Yeah, who's done this thing before?
Exactly. So it's not like TJ Watt doesn't want to participate. But he's on the verge of maybe making a $30 million a year with his next contract that the Steelers are working out. He hasn't practiced in full yet. He hasn't gone, put on his pads and hit with the 11-on-11 sessions. But, you know, one thing that was made clear to us from Keith Butler is that they're kind of comfortable with TJ Watt. No, he knows the system. There's nothing new that he has to learn at this point. And this guy, I mean, he was, arguably the second best defensive player in the NFL last year. Some might argue he was the first, but whether or not, when you're in that top 10 range, you're doing pretty good. But he to me, he's the best edge rusher in football right now. And they kind of know that, and they want to lock it down. One thing I think that is really putting a strain on this situation is everyone's saying, oh, they don't pay $100 million guaranteed and $30 million a year for a defensive player. But people forget that this salary cap is about to take a huge bump.
Big time.
And the entire market for how we've always understood different positions and their payouts is going to completely change. And what TJ Watt's probably doing right now with his agents, there's probably look, man, we're looking to set the tone. And this is kind of the wild, wild west where the Steelers, they're on the side listen, man, we get that that's the case, but we got other people that we want to sign. Minka Fitzpatrick's coming up next year. They're going to have to negotiate with him to keep him around. And, then there's other guys that want to see how can they keep building around this defense that has a nice young core in it. So that's more the situation. It's definitely a hold in. But it doesn't seem like TJ Watt has any resentment about, his time with the Steelers. He's not going to put on the pads and risk himself getting injured until that deal is inked and he knows exactly how much guaranteed money he has. And, and then the Steelers can know for sure, when he'll be ready to go.
Yeah.
So something that I saw about all this, and correct me if my info is wrong here, but it seems like the Steelers don't like to do contract negotiations in the middle of the season, which means at the end of this week, a deal is either done or it's not. So if we get to that point and let's say a deal has not been done, what happens? Does TJ Watt just play out the year, or is there something more sinister afoot here?
I think it becomes a TJ Watt plays out the year once he knows that there's no extension on the table. Now, I will say this, that is very much the Steelers' rule. They don't do that anymore because they don't want, contracts hanging over players' head in the middle of the season. It's like, hey, just play in the middle of the season. We'll deal with it afterwards. That's been their policy for the longest time, and they don't break that for anybody. But when it comes to TJ Watt, I think the Steelers, they do want to get a deal done sooner rather than later, and that's what the clock is ticking to now. But I will say this: if you followed the Steelers for years, you know that Troy Polamalu back in the 2000s, when he signed his major contract extension, he literally signed it on the plane to the week 1 game. So that's the deadline that we're really working with here. It wasn't in training camp, it wasn't in the practices, it was literally on their way to their season opener. So TJ Watt will have the same kind of room to figure this out, what they want to do and how they want to do it. I mean, again, he's still working out at every practice. He's launching medicine balls 60 feet in the air. He's doing all these different drills. He still looks like a phenomenal athlete. He's physically, he looks ready to go. It's just you see him doing this stuff, but he's not doing the 11-on-11s. That's been confirmed by the Steelers PR coming out of theirs. So it's definitely a weird situation for a lot of people because the Bills are right around the corner, and that's a huge opponent to start the season. And I get why Steelers fans are anxious, and even myself, I was like, man, I thought Monday would have been the day they would have announced it. Now, part of this that might have also impacted the announcement or the lack of an announcement here, because the Steelers lost a Steelers legend, Tunch Ilkin, not just the Steelers lineman from the 80s, but also a guy who's worked in Steelers media for several decades. And he's one of the nicest people you could have ever met. So, I sometimes think the Steelers are an organization that likes to pay homage to their people, and that might have slowed things down because Tunch was a central part of the organization to anyone, even rookies knew who that guy was. So part of that might be in play, but the bottom line for me is, these two sides know there's a lot of non-precedented situations here, and both are fighting to set a precedent that will work on their side's favor.
So you have it, a hold-in Pittsburgh, but we're not looking at another Le'Veon Bell situation here. I think, Chris, you and I have talked about a bunch the way that the Pittsburgh Steelers structure contracts. They always come through with their players. Doesn't seem to be a big concern, and maybe we'll get some news on Sunday or on Saturday as the Steelers are traveling. Perhaps TJ Watt signs his contract up in the air on the plane, a la Troy Polamalu. We appreciate you coming through.
Good omen.
I know, right? Appreciate you coming through and keeping us updated, buddy.
Thanks, guys.
So coming up, we are going to talk a little bit about the Houston Texans quarterback situation, which hasn't gotten enough media attention lately. And we'll also talk a little bit about my hopeless futures in fantasy football. But first, it is that time of year. Everybody's going to start watching football now, both college and pro. And BetOnline is your number one spot to find a way to lay some bets down on those games. You can get all the updated odds, props, and contests, including online's biggest $500,000 NFL mega contest and the world's largest survivor pool at $200,000 at BetOnline. Head to the website, use your mobile device. You can sign up today. And be sure to take advantage of their opening day super promo. Opening day is almost here. It is Thursday. It's 2 days from today. So if you make a bet on that game between the Bucs and Cowboys and you lose, you get $25 back of your wager, up to $25 refunded if you lose the bet. So it's like a free gamble. Throw something out there. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all of your favorite sports, from football, but they also have basketball, boxing, your favorite Vegas casino games, everything. Don't wait. Take advantage of all the great offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts.
All right, everybody, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On NFL. Luke Braun at Luke Braun NFL on Twitter. Myself, Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson Nola. Luke, we wanted to talk a little bit about the Houston Texans quarterback situation. As you mentioned earlier, not getting enough attention, but now we finally actually do get to pay attention to it in an interesting and maybe, let's say, less controversial light with a new... with
actual players who are going to play for the Texans. We should talk about those guys.
That's right. The Texans fans deserve better. So here we are to give them that, a starting quarterback named in Houston.
Yes. So they went with Tyrod Taylor, named starting quarterback. I don't think that was much of a surprise if you watched any of the Houston Texans stuff or you listen to Locked On Texans or whatever. It's not like it was going to be Davis Mills over there. So,
right.
But it's official, and that's the thing. And here's the thing. I mean, look, the Houston Texans are clearly in a rebuilding year. They're not a team that's like thinking that, with any delusions about contending or anything like that. But I think Tyrod Taylor's a really good stabilizing presence. His whole knock is that he's too conservative as a quarterback. But for a team where the Texans are, that's just looking to kind of get your feet wet and figure out who's worth keeping into the real years, I think that kind of conservative nature, a really steady Eddie kind of guy, which is what I always view Tyrod Taylor as, just a steady quarterback. It's sort of exactly what a franchise in turmoil needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's always been known as a culture guy, somebody that comes in, has a fantastic attitude, is a leader of the guys around him in the locker room, and is a fantastic and positive presence. That's obviously something that Houston can use right now. My only hope for Tyrod Taylor is that he gets to play all 17 games. And for the third rookie quarterback in a row, he doesn't end up getting, well, I was going to say benched in favor of, but let me also say stabbed in the lung, like what happened to him in Los Angeles. Because that was a whole situation. Wasn't that wild?
Oh my
God. So you have all of that. I just hope that he actually gets 17 games here, because the Texans do and should like Davis Mills. I hope that they give him time to sort of sit back. He's probably one of the guys that needs maybe one of those formative years sitting behind a guy like Tyrod Taylor, who again is that great leader, can help you make that adjustment to the NFL and show you how things are done over on the gridiron as well.
And he has some incentives baked into playing those games. So assuming the rookie Davis Mills doesn't, come around and become, the next Russell Wilson or whatever, he's got like millions of dollars at stake just for starting the game. So yeah, I hope he can stay healthy. I hope he can do it. Like, look, I don't even know if Texans fans are rooting for the Texans, because I feel like at this point they're just looking at draft position, right? I'm rooting for Tyrod Taylor. I feel like he's just like a good dude that is, he's just a backup quarterback in the NFL, but you always love to see guys get that kind of opportunity. Because you go up to Tyrod Taylor and say, hey, you're going to be a backup for your career. Like, he's going to be like, please get out of my apartment.
Right. But, why are you in here? How did you get in? And I need to make some phone calls.
Right. But like, to him, assumedly, this is an opportunity to earn another contract, maybe to earn a chance at becoming the starting NFL quarterback that he almost was in Buffalo or whatever. Right. So this is, I don't know, I'm excited for him. I really hope that Tyrod Taylor kills it, even if it means, the Texans win 2 games and they draft first overall, which is probably what Texans fans want anyways. I hope that Tyrod Taylor acquits himself well and earns, another contract in the league.
Yeah, I'll say this. If Taysom Hill could sniff a starting role at 31, Tyrod Taylor can earn himself a new starting role at 32 or 33. It's absolutely in the cards for the guy. And by the way, you said that Tyrod Taylor has millions baked into his contract. Well, someone now has millions baked into his contract, because this news just broke. The Ravens, the Ravens, according to Ian Rappaport, re-signing or extending Pro Bowl tight end Mark Andrews substantially. Mark Andrews getting a 4-year deal worth $56 million with $14 million APY, which means that he will make more money through 4 years than any other tight end in the league. This is a huge contract for the Pro Bowl tight end.
Yeah, Pro Bowl tight end. It says it all, right? And that Ravens offense is so interesting. And I guess we'll probably get into it a little bit when we talk about the fantasy angle of all of this. But they just lost, they've lost so many of their skill players. They've got like the Gus Edwards thing, and they've got like Marquise Brown and whatever you get out of Rashad Bateman this year. It's, I think, pretty good for Lamar Jackson to have that good outlet tight end that isn't just like a guy you dump off to, like he can actually be a threat. And just have like some extra vertical component of what is ultimately going to be mostly a rushing offense. And that's what you're going to do with Lamar, because that's how Lamar plays. But it's nice to have, a good vertical component and a guy that can win some contested catches. Yeah,
absolutely. You look at his 3 seasons so far with Baltimore in 2018 through 2020, 34 catches, 552 yards, 64 catches for 852 yards, 58 catches for 701 yards after missing a pair of games in last year's season. So he's progressively been, reliable. And the thing that I love about it is that you look at his average depth of target over all 3 seasons, 10.8, 10.6, 10.2. So he has consistently been somebody that has been able to help you move the chains. He's been somebody that has been targeted downfield quite a bit, and each season has been a producing entity for his quarterback. So this absolutely makes a lot of sense for the Baltimore Ravens, who tend to always lean in on that tight end position, particularly as of late.
Yeah, every cog has its place in that Ravens offense, much like a car, and you should take care of yours. At rockauto.com, look at that one. At rockauto.com, you can find just about anything you could possibly need for your car, be it regular everyday supplies like a jumper cables or a tire repair kit or something, safety supplies, all the way to if you're a true DIY kind of person, gaskets and valves and all kinds of stuff. Just enter your make, your year, and your model at rockauto.com, and it'll sort through their unbelievably large and expansive catalog of car parts to make sure you're getting something that is compatible with your car. And you'll be able to save $1 doing that as well, because Rock Auto lets you buy directly from the manufacturers. You're not going through a brick and mortar auto shop that's going to upsell you because they're a retail joint and you're a retail customer, while they go out back and wholesale dump off all these parts to a mechanic at much less of the price. Everybody pays the same price at Rock Auto. They're a family company and they're going to take care of you. So head on over to rockauto.com, and whatever you buy at checkout, there's a How You Heard About Us section. Make sure you let them know that Locked On sent you. Rock Auto, amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Also, Ross, let me know if you are familiar with this particular dilemma. Let's say you've got a device that you're catching the game on, and then another one that you use to stream all your favorite shows. And then you're watching sports highlights on your phone. And then you have a whole other device that's got your neighbor's login that you're stealing for all that good stuff.
Yep.
That's a lot, right? And if you didn't want to keep track of all of that stuff, I want to tell you a better way to deal with that. It is called DirecTV Stream, and it brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before. So you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. It means no more juggling remotes, no need to buy another device ever again. The best part, no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package.
All right, everybody, it is Tuesday here on Locked On NFL. So that can only mean one thing. Tomorrow is Wednesday, but also that it is the Fantasy Forum here on Tuesdays at Locked On NFL. You've got myself, Luke, you've got Luke Braun and myself, Ross Jackson, and we are joined by Marcus Mosher at Marcus_Mosher here with the Locked On Podcast Network in an array of different responsibilities. But of course, one of our fantastic fantasy experts. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. Just trying to get ready for this NFL season. It's going to be busy. It's going to be a lot of fun. So make sure you're checking us out on Locked On Dynasty. How's that for a plug?
There you go.
Let's
you nailed it.
That
was perfect. Yes. Locked On Dynasty Football. You should check them out every Monday through Friday. Marcus, I want to start off here. You're ready for the NFL season. We're ready for the NFL season, and fantasy football is heating up with week 1 just around the corner. Who are some of the big performances that you're expecting to see here in week 1?
Now, I promise, Ross, I'm not doing this just because you're on this podcast, but we should talk about Alvin Kamara, right?
Yes, we should talk about
Last year when he played Green Bay, he had a monster game, 45 fantasy points in PPR leagues. Obviously, the Saints start off with Green Bay this year. I think with the lack of weapons in that passing offense, other than Marquez Callaway, there's really nobody else that they're going to be throwing the ball to. I think Kamara is going to see over 20 touches. I think outside of Christian McCaffrey, he's the running back that I would want to be starting this week.
Suck it, Luke.
I know. Bo took him in our Dynasty League in the expansion draft. He took him from me and then grabbed DeAndre Swift to boot, leaving me high and dry.
Smart man.
All right, so here's my question for you. So we're coming up on week 1 here. Most of us have done our drafts already. If not, it's coming up. You come out of your draft, you got like a big hole at wide receiver or at tight end or something. You say, oh, the draft did not go well for me. Who is somebody that could have gone undrafted that might be the secret answer to a roster hole that I may or may not have?
So it's a great question there. I know.
But asking for a friend.
Yeah, we all have this problem here. Here's what I would say, Luke. There's guys sitting out in free agency now that are going to have big week 1 performances, but aren't going to have long-term value. I will give you a name. What about Deshaun Jackson with the Los Angeles Rams? Every single week 1, Deshaun Jackson blows up and has a monster performance, but he can never stay healthy. I think with the Rams, with Matt Stafford on Sunday Night Football, you're going to see a couple throws down the field that him and Stafford connect on. So if you're looking for like a low-end wide receiver 3 or a flex play, I almost will guarantee you Deshaun Jackson is out there. You can play him. He's only owned in 3% of ESPN leagues right now. I think Deshaun Jackson is a nice what-the-heck flex this week.
Oh, I like that. The what the heck flex. Let's keep that. Let's keep that.
Get that on a mug.
I love it. So speaking of those players that can have big week one performances, is there anybody that's benefiting from particular matchups throughout this week that fantasy owners should be aware of?
I mean, Julio Jones has a fantastic matchup against the Arizona Cardinals this week. His first game with the Titans, he's healthy, he's ready to go. I don't know if you guys have seen that Cardinals cornerback situation right now, but it's like Byron Murphy, Marco Wilson. It's not great. And I think Julio Jones is going to have maybe the biggest game of the season. Look for them to throw the ball a ton. I think Julio could have low-end wide receiver 1 potential here in week 1.
And look, it's really probably too early for like buy low kind of things. But I mean, if you were, say, again, dissatisfied with your draft, and you're looking for maybe not necessarily like a guy who will be on waivers, and you're maybe looking to get somebody a little more established than that, is there anybody who would be worth buying low on right now at the beginning of the season in hopes that they give you something else later on?
I just want to say, I don't think Luke liked his draft very much.
Yeah, okay, first of all, what did you like about your draft, man? You gotta tell me what's going on.
I showed up late to it and auto-drafted for the first 3 rounds.
Oh, no.
Well, there you go. That's the pride. It's user error. There you go, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's always. I'm terrible at fantasy football. That's why I need you, Marcus.
Yes, I got you. I got a guy for you. I think Antonio Brown is somebody who's gone really late in drafts, and I still think is undervalued. I would try to trade for him now before the team's week 1 game against Tampa Bay. Over the last 6 weeks of the season, he was a top 10 receiver in points per game. I think now that he's got a year in that system, Tom Brady's been there for 2 years. I think you can get him at a pretty cheap price, and I think he can give you some good wide receiver 3 numbers. That's the guy that I would try to be targeting in trades now before the season starts.
Love that. All right. This is something we're going to ask every week here for our Locked On NFL Fantasy Forum. What player should fantasy owners be on the lookout for to add to their team ahead of this weekend's games?
All right, so I got a really deep name for you. This is Tyson Williams for the Baltimore Ravens. They just had some awful injury luck this year. Obviously, J.K. Dobbins went down with an injury. Now Justice Hill is out for the year. Gus Edwards is the lead back, but Tyson Williams is really interesting. He's 215 pounds, right on the 4.4s of his pro day. And he's really the only guy left in Baltimore outside of Gus Edwards. Would not be surprised if this is somebody who gets 12 to 14 carries against the Las Vegas Raiders in week 1, only owned in about 18% of leagues. You get phenomenal athlete. If he gets that many touches and a really good run first offense, he could have some nice fantasy value. So keep an eye on Tyson Williams.
Love that. Right behind the Gus bus, as Kate would say.
There you go.
I have one more question for you, Marcus. I'm going to let you go. So as we are going into this season, I think this is a really good time. Just generally, we're not talking about players or highlights or anything like that. General fantasy football, the one tip you would give a player to up their game as we head into the 2021 season, generic fantasy football tip that will give you an edge on people who don't know it.
Do not overreact to week 1 or week 2. ADP is still more important in weeks 1 and week 2 than the actual performance. So if you see, let's say Ezekiel Elliott struggled in the first 2 games of the season, don't panic. And if you don't have him, go get him because you know he's a good player. You know in time the Cowboys are going to figure things out. Just relax. Remember that this is a marathon, not a sprint. So don't overreact to the first couple games of the year.
That is lovely. That is Marcus_Mosher on Locked On Dynasty up there with Kate. And thank you, Marcus, so much for all of the sage advice. Maybe I'll lose by a little less.
Yes, Luke. Good luck with your auto draft.
Thank you so much, Marcus. So tomorrow on the Locked On NFL podcast, Tony Wiggins and James Rapine are going to have you taken care of. It is always draft season on Wednesdays a little bit, so they'll talk about the NFL draft a little bit, as well as start breaking down the season opener. We're here. We're previewing actual live games, so do not miss out on that. I also want to point you to the Locked On Bets podcast with your boy Q and Lee Sterling, a handicapping expert, giving you all the gambling advice you need, especially important as we get into the season. Week 1, notoriously hard to bet on. For Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, I'm Luke Braun at Luke Braun NFL on Twitter. We will see you all next time here on the Locked On NFL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.